All right, everybody, we are excited about the show that we have for you today. Listen, I want to do this very quickly. First of all, let me tell you some of the things that we're going to talk about. We are talking about what in the world is going on with Iran, with them literally trying to go to different bodies like the European Union. Folks, of all people, talk about Ezekiel 38. The European Union and develop a new nuclear agreement strategy. So we've got that going on. We've got United States carrier groups moving out of places that they have been in for the last 60 or 70 years. That's going to be an interesting conversation. We're going to have a conversation directly related to Hamas and some new information that we have received specifically about things happening in Judea and Samaria. Many of you know it as the West Bank. We're going to have that conversation and what that actually means, because there is a perception that exists. We will talk about the most sophisticated weapon that Hamas has in their possession right now, and by far it is one of the most sophisticated weapons in the world, and that is the New York Times and many of the false, insane media conglomerations that exist. We're going to talk about that. And if we have time, we will talk about the United Nations, because there are some heavy implications that exist there. Now, before we do any of that, one of the things that I need us to do, because it's very, very important, is I need us to stop for a moment and just reflect upon where we think the world is going, okay? Because I'm telling you, we are undoubtedly in a mode and in a place and in a time where we are beginning to see some of the signs that tell us we're getting closer to the end. And I just, by the way, last week did a video on this, Matthew chapter 24. I released it, and I want you guys to go to that. It's a very, very important video, and I released it a few days ago, so you should go there. And then one other thing I want to mention, for those of you guys that are continuing to be faithful to us with super stickers and super chats and all of the amazing support that you give us, we want to thank you for it. We have so much to talk about with so little time that we will acknowledge you, of course, in the chat, but we are going to just be moving. And so we're not going to be able to stop to talk about any of the super chats, but I want to thank you in advance for your support with those, because those make such a difference for us. So, David, let's just start right off the bat. First of all, how are you, bro? And let's talk about this. I mean, this is some major stuff happening, and perhaps what might be amongst one of the biggest stories is what's happening with Iran. But what's the latest and greatest with you, bro?
Well, we're back from Hawaii. We were out for to Hawaii for a little while. And I am going to throw a teaser here. I'm putting together a movie about the, the Balagan connection between December 7th, 1941 and October 7th, 2024. And you know, the attack on Pearl Harbor and the attack in southern Israel, and some of the things that, I mean, just standing on the memorial of the Arizona in Pearl Harbor, it kind of, so we'll be talking about that. But we're back here, and we're back into content and things. And again, I'm just looking at the news here, and more I'm getting a feeling that there's a there's a mad piper walking around the Middle East with a flute that some people can hear, some people cannot, but everybody's reacting to, and that is Iran. And more we're seeing the fingers of Iran messing in all kinds of different things, absurdities that I can't understand. And I was watching some websites on the other side of the political fence, you know, getting all excited about all kinds of things that Iran is doing. And I'm saying, wait a minute, don't you understand? I mean, it's like, you know, handing the kindergarten over to a known child molester. I mean, oh, yeah. They've done it again and again. They've said that they're going to do it again, and people are saying, oh, but now they're saying they're sorry, and everybody's all excited. Yeah. And this is driving me crazy, and we can go into different aspects of that. So where do you want to start with this one?
Let's talk about Iran. Let's talk about what's going on with that situation, because it's such an interesting circumstance. This is a big deal, and what's going on, especially with them going to the EU. I mean, what in the world?
Okay,
How about you talk about that? Give everybody the lowdown on what's going on.
Let's kind of back up a little bit. Let's start off with this. Iran used to be no, let's even back up a little bit further. Iranians are not Arabs. They're Muslims, but they're not Arabs, meaning they actually adhere to the Muslim religion, but they are not racially of the Arab peoples. They are not from Arabia. They're from Persia, the Persian Empire, the whole Book of Esther. All of that is Iran that became Muslim at some point, and they adopted a very radical version of Islam called the Shia Islam, which is very different from the Sunni. Islam as a whole, and Iran in particular, is very, very disappointed with the fact that the Muslims are not running the world. It's a deep, deep issue inside the Muslim world, and we have to listen to what they say when they say it, is that we should be running the world. We have the greatest religion. We have the final prophet. We should know this. And the fact that we are not is because we are not being righteous enough. We're not being pious enough. We're not being fanatical enough. And Iran simplifies, we want to return to our piety. We wanted to return to our religion. We want to return to our fundamentalism. The name for that in Arabic is jihad. And we want to spread this to the rest of the world. That is Iran. Let's make this clear. And they believe that they are going to lead the return of the Islam to the front of the world. Now, another thing you need to understand, that as opposed to Christianity today, by the way, in the past it wasn't that way, but as opposed to Christianity today, Islam is a political religion, meaning the head of the Iranian religion, the Pope of Shia religion, is also the head of the Iranian state. It's like saying that the Pope in Rome is also the head of all of the, by the way, that was the situation for many, many years. Oh, yeah. Okay. Is the head of all of the Christian, he is the supreme leader. It's what they call him, the supreme leader of Christendom. So the Ayatollah, which is the word for Pope, basically, is the supreme leader of Shiite Islam. It is a religious and a political role put together. And they believe that they should use politics, military, economic means to enhance the religion. It's like the Pope saying, let's use everything that the Catholic Church is in order to make political concessions. I mean, that's where Iran is. Let's make this clear. They say it, they mean it, they do it. I don't understand why we, as the Western world, as Christianity, don't take them for their word. They want to overthrow Christianity as the main religion, the main concept, the main creed in the world today. And that's on their agenda.
Okay. Can we just back up for a second? Because this is something that we know. We have spent a lot of time drilling it in people's heads, what the truth is concerning Iran, what's going on. Quite frankly, I think that when you make the statement that Islam is a political sort of a culture or religion, Islam is doing with its religion what we should be doing with the truth. And I think it's really funny because as Christians, we constantly feed the lie to other people that says, we have no business getting into the political discussion because God has nothing to do with politics and so on and so forth. When in reality, our view of God creates the politics that we currently live in and are in the center of. So this is where the Shiites are getting it right, in the sense that their view of Allah takes on a very different connotation within the political circle, which creates a whole new issue for everybody. So this is not some, I wake up in the morning, go to my 9-to-5 job, maximize the income that I can make, choose to exchange my time in exchange for a few dollars to go in my pocket. That's not this. This is I wake up in the morning and I don't do a 9-to-5, I do a 24/7. And I'm doing it because I believe this is my commission from Allah. I do this bi'isma Allah, in the name of Allah. So this is something that they take very seriously. They are given permission in the Quran. The Quran teaches them this. The Quran teaches them to be deceivers. They're taught that. The Quran says, وَمَكْرُ وَمَكْرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَكَرِينَ, which basically says that Allah is the chief of deceivers. So they can even deceive in what they do. They even have a word for it, taqiyya, which is a whole other story, different discussion altogether.
No, wait, no, it's not, because I think we're seeing another example of taqiyya.
Well, yeah, but there's a bigger, you're right. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be bringing it up right now. Like I would not even be bringing up the issue of lying and deception if I wasn't going to a bigger point. Yeah. The bigger point is they utilize lying and deception to cover up the truth because they understand the power of the truth, and actually do everything that they can to keep the truth from manifesting using the utilization of a lie. Can I give you an example of this?
Yeah, let's do it.
And by the way, this actually comes from a Shiite-leaning country. This is exactly what ends up happening, okay? If you look at the prophecies in the Old Testament that deal with Jesus touching his foot down on the Mount of Olives and coming through the East Gate, what's funny to me is that the liars of the world, the ones who worship a false god, the ones who actually worship the God who says he's the chief of deceivers, take Bible prophecy so seriously, the words of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they take it so seriously that they do two things to the area of the Temple Mount. The first thing that they do is they seal off the eastern gate. It completely cemented off, sealed off where nobody can get into it, because they believe that Jesus will come back doing what he's doing more than the Christians do. And the other thing that they do, and this sounds even crazier, is they set up a cemetery that is under the wall in that area, in that valley. Okay, because they don't want Christ to walk over it.
James, I can literally see the cemetery behind you on that picture.
Yes, okay? That's right.
And if you move your chair a little bit, you're going to see the gate that is actually sealed off. Okay, it's the other way.
Here, let me get. Yeah. It shows the opposite end on my camera. So okay, sorry. That's why.
And you can actually see that cemetery right below the Dome of the Rock. And the idea is this, and again, it is representative of the fact that Islam is not a faith-based religion. It is a power-based religion, which means
deception-based more than ever. Yeah,
exactly. So they believe that in playing this game, they make their religion more powerful, and my religion is going to overcome your religion because we're more powerful. It's like, like children in kindergarten saying, my daddy's stronger than your daddy. That's the basic kind of idea that is behind that. And they are forgetting the faith element. Not forgetting, there's no faith element in Islam. It's not about faith. It's about power. You don't have a personal relationship with God. Your relationship goes through your clergy, through the religious, through the system. Now, anybody who knows anything about history knows that the Catholic world was that way for a long time, where the Pope was a political entity as much as he was a faith entity. And look what it did. It brought the Dark Ages to all of Europe.
100%.
Things. And they are in, I would call this the Dark Ages of Islam.
Yes.
But the problem is that we are Christian. And when a Christian who feels generosity, who feels turn the other cheek, who feels love your enemy, comes up with an enemy who feels control your enemy, lie to them, and conquer them if you can, what side is going to have the advantage in this situation?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think we're seeing this now. And let's bring up, I don't know if you can find, I'm looking at ABC News, the ABC News headline today from 5 hours ago. Iran's supreme leader has opened the door to renewed negotiations with the United States over his country's rapidly advancing nuclear program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't have asked for a better illustration or a better example of what we've just now been talking about than what we're staring at right smack right now in our faces like that.
So can I tell you what I think is happening with Iran? And I think that there's a lot of validity to my thought. Now,
before we get that, if you don't mind, just a quick
please.
Do you want to explain what the nuclear, how do you say, negotiation is and what it means?
Sure.
For people who know a little bit about it. So,
the people that watch us are very well aware of the nuclear negotiation. It first showed its ugly face with what was called the JCPOA. That's how what we refer to it. The JCPOA was never worth the paper that it was written on. I mean, literally, toilet paper has more value than the JCPOA. But the original premise behind the JCPOA was that Iran, and this is during the Obama era, that Iran would cooperate with a series of actions agreed to in exchange for certain sanctions being pulled away for them, as well as the potential or the possibility for some revenue increases through the sale of oil to certain people with mandated returns. There was a lot of issues tied into it. Now, when it was originally signed, it was signed at the great and significant objection of Israel for lots of reasons. Perhaps the most significant of those reasons was the sunset clause. For those people that don't know what the sunset clause is, the sunset clause is basically a clause within the JCPOA that says you cooperate with us with respect to your nuclear capacity, and you limit your nuclear creation, for lack of a better term. You limit your nuclear production to very specific functions related to energy production for energy independence within your country. Then we will reward you by lifting any of the constraints that have existed with respect to how you enrich uranium. The problem with that was, and this is the thinking, this is Western thinking, this is American thinking. The problem with that is that America thinks that Iran is going to operate the same way they operate. And the idea here is once we can convince you of the benefit of using your nuclear capacity for wholesome and very productive things, then by the time you get to the sunset clause, you will be incentivized to not enrich uranium for the purpose of military action. And if you can prove to us at the end of the sunset clause that you indeed have been incentivized, then we're going to incentivize you further by dropping a whole bunch of American money and actually international money into your lap so that you can build and create even more infrastructure. Now, Iran saw this as a great deal because for them, what that basically means is that they're going to mess around with the IAEA inspectors. They're not going to tell the truth about what's going on, which they did. And they're going to continue to enrich. Yeah, and they're going to continue to enrich uranium. And so in doing so, by the time they get to the sunset clause, then they'll be able to give the whole world a big flip off and then start launching weapons. And so that's been, in essence, the way it's worked. Now, Trump saw the problem when he came into office. He said, this is terrible. Netanyahu's presentation regarding how much uranium they were enriching was terrible. It was his presentation was great, but it was terrible in that it revealed the insanity of Iran, right? And so Trump basically said, no, enough of this. There is no JCPOA anymore. We're withdrawing ourselves from the agreement. We have the legal right to do so because he violated many of the clauses that were in the agreement, and that enables us to walk away. And now that we walk away, we're going to sanction the literal hell out of Iran.
Exactly.
And that's what they did. And they were beginning to win. They were beginning to win until Iran could sense the weakness that was going on, especially with the potential for Biden to become president. And the worst thing that Biden could have ever done when he became president was remove the Yemeni Houthis as an enemy combatant, because the moment that happened, Iran recognized what was going on, and the JCPOA was back on the table, except for the fact that the sunset clause had already been passed, and now they are going to view themselves as people who honor the terms of the contract. The United States was the one that didn't honor it and withdrew, and Trump is such a bad guy. And of course, Biden's handlers and everybody else are like, what does it matter to us? If it gives us another excuse to put ourselves in Iran, then that's what we're going to do. We're warmongers. That's how we make our money. And that's exactly what's happened. So that's where we're at. And so now the JCPOA has fallen apart yet again for lots of different reasons. Perhaps the most significant of reasons involves a major technicality that sits with Russia and Germany, and that's a whole other issue. It actually relates to Nord Stream. And of course, believe it or not, this is very interesting. There is one very specific thing that happened with Western Sahara recently that actually has an effect on one of the terms of the JCPOA that nobody thought of. Well, I'm almost certain that people in the United States were fully aware of what that implication may be, because of the corridor or the passageway via the Mediterranean out to the Atlantic that touches that tip between Spain and Morocco. And of course, for those of you that don't understand the significance of Western Sahara, all you have to do is think about Morocco. And when you start thinking about Morocco, then you have to start thinking about a recent statement that Netanyahu made on behalf of the state of Israel, very much standing in support of Morocco's position with respect to Western Sahara, which, by the way, created the potential for yet another regional war. But it was done in a very calculated way. And I think that had that statement been made post October 7th, Netanyahu probably wouldn't have made the statement. But that's a whole other story. It's a different thing that all relates to the Abraham Accords and the idea of them seeking to honor a certain function of normalization with respect to economic prosperity, which is why Netanyahu did what he had to do. Anyway, I diverted a little bit, but all of that to say that when we start talking about this JCPOA, it's being re-erected again, and that's a problem for us.
Well, I don't think it's yet being re-erected.
They're talking about re-erecting it. That's what they're talking about.
The only thing that's happened, as I understand right now, is the new president that was actually elected, across the street from where the Hamas official was assassinated, and is now trying to make his way, actually has reached out to the Europeans, mostly, not to the Americans, by the way, to the Europeans, and said, okay, let's talk about this.
But that's his way of reaching out to the Americans. I mean, let's just be real. That is their attempt at readdressing or recreating a JCPOA type of agreement. Iran is never going to reach out to America directly. The only way Iran is going to reach out to America directly was when Abdullahian was alive, because when Abdullahian was alive, of course, he was having direct contact with somebody on the inside of the United States of America. That actually came out in the public, and we know that they were having some very serious meetings with our State Department. And basically the purpose of those meetings, after this, by the way, post October the 7th, was in essence to subvert Bibi Netanyahu. But it's interesting because the president, Raisi, and as well as Abdullahian, they had a meeting with an Israeli man by the name of Helocopter, who was a member of the Mossad, who abruptly ended the meeting, if you know what I mean. So that's a whole other story. But we were already dealing with that. There was already unilateral conversations happening with Iran, which is disgusting. But yes, that's what it was already happening. So
let's talk about what Iran, I think, is doing. Okay, and here's the thing: ever since the Biden administration stepped into office, ever since they realized that Trump was not going to be on their doorstep. By the way, let's back up a little way. I want to say something very clear. One of the things that Trump is saying is, yes, we have the strongest military in the world. We could take out Tehran if we wanted to, but we also have the strongest economy in the world. And why should the United States of America not use its economic, political, or what we call soft power as much as they use their hard power in order to achieve goals and results that are actually advantageous for the American regime, economy, and stability, by the way.
But let me just really let me answer what I believe was a rhetorical question in nature. But let me just provide an answer to it that'll be a cherry on top. The reason why the United States of America, under the control of the Biden regime, has refused to use its soft power in order to accomplish many of these positions is, first of all, they don't want to, number one. But number two, even if they did want to, in order to be able to successfully use your soft power, you have to be willing to demonstrate that at the flip of a finger, you are willing to use your hard power. And that the only person that was effective in doing that in recent years with presidents was Reagan and Trump.
And here we are. And so here we are back after 3.5 years of Biden administration, where the Iranians are saying, yep, you negotiated with us, but we kind of ran you around in circles. Okay. And now we've blown up the Middle East. I mean, everything that's happened has been based on the fact Hamas wouldn't have come out if the Trump administration had been in office, or on the flip side of this, Hamas would not have come out if they didn't feel that they had the backing of Iran.
I'll take it a step further. I would suspect that Bennett would not have been the prime minister. I would suspect that even the changes with the foreign minister prior to Bennett and prior to the assembly of the last Knesset would not have taken place had Trump been reelected. I'm
not gonna push back on you this, but I want to say this: Iran has seen American weakness.
Yeah. Well, I want you to push back on this because if you feel differently, I want to talk this one out because it's kind of an important point. Because look,
I believe that this would have played out like this no matter what government was in power in Israel.
Do you honestly think that Bennett would have made the play successfully that he had made with people within the Likud, knowing that Trump was still in office and would strengthen the position of Israel with the international community based on what he was already doing, especially after the movement of the embassy and everything else that was going on? I'm challenging you. Like, I want you to think that through for a second.
We have a saying in Hebrew that what you see from here is not what you see from there, which means we've seen again and again that when Israeli politicians who make this and this and this and this step into power, they change, they move, and they kind of ratify their political positions on a lot of different issues. I can give you so many Rabin, Sharon, all kinds of different kind of occasions for this. But let's put it like this. I do believe that the lack of leadership on the Western world, the rise in, I'm going to say, for lack of a better word, courage or I'm not going to use the military terms, but the rise of the feeling that the Iranians had that we can do this, and there's nobody that's going to push back, had less to do with what government was in Israel and more to do what government was in the United States of America.
Okay, let me throw this question out at you because you're right. You're helping to make my point. Okay, let me ask you a question. Let's take people like Golda, or let's take Sharon, or let's take Netanyahu. Or let's take any one of these characters because they're all different from Bennett. Not a single one of them have functioned at any level like Bennett functioned, okay? Do you think for a second, 1 second, that if the Israeli people, the Jews that live in Israel, recognize a strong U.S. president who is more historically supportive towards Israel than any other president in U.S. history, and the compatibility that exists between those two world leaders is strong, meaning that whoever is in office, let's just say Sharon or Netanyahu or anybody, do you think for 1 second the Israeli people would put in a guy like Bennett, knowing fully and understanding that he would poo-poo on the United States and make an appeal to the international community for something that Israel knows it's not going to get?
Have you seen the latest polls in Israel?
And it's not and by the way, it's not a rhetorical question. Like I'm genuinely
here's an answer. Have you seen
questioning it?
Have you seen the latest polls in Israel?
I haven't, but I can tell you this. I think the latest polls in Israel are irrelevant because the discussion has nothing to do with post October 7th.
Do you know
this is a discussion of where we are pre-October 7th.
You know who would come out on top as of now?
With the polls in Israel?
Yep.
If I had to make a guess?
Yep.
In terms of who's running?
Yeah, I mean, who would have the best chances of putting together a coalition government in Israel today, based on the resulting polls today?
Definitely not. Definitely
I
not Gavir. Definitely not Gavir.
Oh no, Ben Gvir is going down. Schmutwitz is going out.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'll make it easy. Bennett. Bennett had as the leader. If he comes back and he steps in, the chances of him putting together a non-religious, non-ultra-right government, what we call a center government, according to the poll that I saw the day before yesterday, is the highest than of anybody else.
The only way that I would
Netanyahu's not going to pull it together because he is still, I'm going to say, tainted with responsibility for what happened on October 7th.
I would agree with you.
Gans would not be able to pull it together.
Yeah, Gans, no way.
Gans has nothing.
No way.
Lapid is not even close.
Yeah.
And if you want to put, I mean, I've heard your argument about Israel Katz. Maybe, I mean, they would put something if Netanyahu stepped down from the Likud and somebody like Katz did step in, he would have to distance himself from the Miri Regev and Amsalem's. But basically, this is a situation right now. And what I'm trying to kind of reach to, and again, I'm trying to get back out of the Israeli politics into the Middle Eastern politics, is that I think Iran felt that whoever was the government in Israel, they had the chance to pull this off. It's a bully mentality. And if nobody's pushing back against the bully, then the bully will push the envelope more and more as much as he can.
See, I think it's a little bit opposite. And I'll just let me just tell you why. Bennett for sure is going to be the one that people might want, only if and only if Biden somehow, or his remnants, Harris, becomes president. If that happens, then Bennett is naturally going to be the person that they're going to want, because they understand that they have to play nice with the United States of America in order to produce some semblance. But there's one thing that works against them, and this is where the polls lie. And even the Israeli polls, they get it wrong every single time. As a matter of fact, the recent J-Post poll that took place a few months ago regarding this same exact subject was so dead wrong it wasn't even funny. And the big variable that everybody, well, let me just say this, nobody outside of Israel takes into account, very few people take into account, is the fact that there is one thing that most Jews will stand together on. Conservative, left, right, everybody, they all stand on this. No two-state solution. They all agree with that now, post-October the 7th. So if you agree with that, then the question you have to ask yourself is, what leader do I need to bring into play to represent us to ensure that that doesn't happen?
We need to have a discussion about the two-state solution. That's another whole discussion that, I mean, would take off probably 3 hours of our time.
Oh, I know. Okay,
but
it's complicated.
But I'm still trying to step out of internal Israeli politics, because I think we make a mistake in kind of weighing, evaluating, and deciphering what Iran is going to do based on Netanyahu. And I'm hearing the left and Israel's enemies always saying it's about Netanyahu, it's about his government, it's about this. No, I think the political situation in the world and in the Middle East, and remind me to get to the aircraft carriers a little bit later and things like that. But the political situation, I think, has more of an urgency on what's happening and the decisions that Iran is making than the internal issues. And again, me and you know Gadi Taub. Gadi Taub blames all of this on the judicial reforms.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know if you've heard that.
I've heard Gadi hint at it. I read an article that he wrote in the Tablet where he talks about this, and it is a phenomenally, brilliantly argued argument.
But the guy's amazing. But I want to do something that I think is really important for our audiences there, because I would have a different discussion with Israelis. And the difference is this: Iran is playing us all. Iran is messing with our heads, messing with our emotions, and just reading the ABC News. This is ABC. This is not Fox. This is not the Jerusalem Post, which basically quotes Iran when they reach out to try to rekindle these negotiations, basically saying, first of all, we're reaching out to an enemy. We want to talk, meaning, let's make this clear. The United States is our enemy, but we're trying to get concessions out of them. We attacked American bases more than 200 times in the Middle East, but we want to talk and reach the Americans, to reach out to the Americans to help us achieve our goals.
But you understand, I'm going to make myself clear because I'm going to push back here. You understand that this has everything to do with Israeli politics and even more so to do with American politics.
Okay.
Okay. Let me draw the picture for you because the picture is an important one to draw. Okay. There was a line that was drawn in the sand that most people, whether it be in Israel or in the United States, did not recognize. The line was drawn recently, and it was a very, very definitive line and one that made it very clear to the people in the know that Netanyahu is not going to move. Okay? And that was the decision that he made with the Philadelphia corridor. Now, we spent some time talking about this, right? We talked about the idea that Netanyahu has made it clear the Israeli army, the IDF, is going to be there. They're not moving. They're taking strong positions there. Personally, my opinion, I think the Philadelphia corridor probably should have been the first place that they tackled. The only reason why I don't feel dogmatic about it is because there's a lot of variables I don't know. And I think that you would have been super hard pressed to go there first, dealing with some of the problems that we were facing in Hadessa and Khan Yunis and some of these other problems that we were facing to the north. However, let me just simply...
Do you want an answer to that before we go on?
Yeah, sure. But then I want to draw this out for you because this is an important point.
Okay. So let me, I've been in the Philadelphia corridor more than once. I actually commanded part of the Philadelphia corridor as a major at least twice. So not the whole thing, but a piece of it.
No, this is your wheelhouse.
Okay. So the Philadelphia corridor is very, very important. And here's part of the problem. Okay. Part of the problem is on the other side of the Philadelphia corridor is Egypt, who is doing the double dance, the forked tongue. Okay, we say one thing above the ground, but we're allowing something else to happen below the ground. That's number one. Number two, I don't know if you know, but Israel has a deep trauma about the Philadelphia corridor. There was a APC with altogether, I think, 13 soldiers that was hit by an IUD in the Philadelphia corridor, and not just a regular IUD that hit the thing. It totally dismantled. It's like half a ton of explosives underneath the Philadelphia corridor. Half a ton of explosives blew up that APC so bad that pieces of the bodies were spread on a circular area of more than half a kilometer, meaning our special forces had to go in and literally, filter the sand of the route in order to pick up the pieces of the body that we could bring them back. The problem with the Philadelphia corridor is that when you sit on the Philadelphia corridor, you are smack on a defined route. And anybody who knows anything about being attacked on that, if you drive back and forth on the route, you're actually opening up yourself to attack. That's why the Philadelphia corridor has always been a sensitive and a tactical nightmare, both an emotional nightmare and a tactical nightmare for Israel. And that's why, by the way, we decided not to start off with the Philadelphia corridor.
Which makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Now that we know, though, what's going on, I think it was only later on in the war when we realized the massive difference between what the Egyptians are saying and what they're doing. Meaning, okay, there's a couple of tunnels under the Philadelphia corridor. Then we realize that the Egyptians are allowing a two-lane highway to go back and forth underneath the Philadelphia corridor. And here's the problem. Who is making the most money off of it? the Egyptian
That's a tricky question.
that the Egyptian high command, all of the money that was being poured into the Palestinians, all of the Kuwaiti money, I don't know if you remember the suitcases,
Oh yeah,
actually being used to buy off the Egyptian high command that was making billions off of allowing this corridor to keep itself open. We didn't realize the deepness of that difference until much, much later. So now that we know this, Benjamin Netanyahu, and again, we need to stop saying Benjamin Netanyahu because it's not him, it's the government. We have to realize it's the government standing up and saying, wait a minute, this is much worse than we thought it was. We cannot allow this to continue.
Yeah. And I mean, but there are some things that plays to Israel's advantage with holding the strong point in the Philadelphia corridor. No matter how much of a sacrifice it may be, perhaps one of the most significant variables that exist centers around one man, and his name is Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Because if you think about it, he has a deep-rooted hate for Islamic Brotherhood. He did with Islamic Brotherhood not quite what Jordan did to the Palestinians, but it was a pretty significant stand that he took. But let me go back 1 second because this is important.
I need to answer this one. Who opened up Sisi's regime in Egypt?
Say again, baby. Say that again.
Sisi. Who is covering him? Who's holding him up? Who's giving him? The army. The army that is making money off of the Philadelphia corridor.
Of course. But remember this. This is important, right? Because the army has this in common with the president of Egypt. This is a very, very important point. And that is, although the army is making money that is coming in from some of the Kuwaitis, by the way, not just the Kuwaitis, but people in Qatar, because where's a lot of the money in Qatar coming from, right?
Let me make this clear. How about U.S. dollars with Benjamin Franklin on
that's
it?
That's where I was going.
Being given to UNRWA.
That's where I was going.
Nations organizations that is being put in bank accounts of Egyptian officers. This is your money. This is the American money actually being given to the United Nations, who has given it to the Egyptians in order to keep the Philadelphia corridor open and flowing.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly. And and by the way, the United Nations, look, they're one of the largest terrorist organizations in the world. I mean, we'll just leave that alone. I really believe that. But okay, all of that said, let me play out the scenario for you because I think the scenario is an important one. Okay, I do think the people in office matter. I think that the fact that right now there is a lame duck president that is sitting in the United States Oval Office, I think that's a time clock. I think the Iranians recognize they have a short amount of time to act. Yeah. And the question that they have, understanding that there's a short amount of time to act, is this. Here's the question. Do we get violently confrontational and take advantage of the weakness in the current regime in United States office right now? Or do we go a different route? Now, the deciding variable for how they answer that question, do we take advantage of the weakness and go violent, or do we go a different route, is fundamentally predicated upon the philosophy of the person who's in office in Israel. And the reason why they think about that is this. If I have, let's just say this right now, if I have a guy like Bennett, or forget Bennett, let's just say we have Yair Lapid in office. Okay? He's proven himself. His track record is proven as the foreign minister. Okay? Him and Bennett were like two peas in a pod in many ways. Although they did not appear to have close ties in one sense, and they tried to distance themselves from one another, they were walking in lockstep. Especially with the situation that happened off the coast of Lebanon with respect to the offshore drilling that was happening, okay? What they gave up is unthinkable. And what Lapid did as foreign minister, and even in his temporary position, as the prime minister, he did exactly what we would expect to have expected him to do. So let me just back up. So Iran has a very serious problem they're facing. This is the problem, okay? We have a moment of weakness. We can take advantage by a violent confrontation. We've already launched the largest missile attack in the history of the world. So we can take advantage of the weakness by doing that 3 or 4 more times and draining Israel of the money and the resources that they have to defend themselves and hope that the fifth or sixth time will be successful. That's one option. And that's an option that's very viable to them. Okay? Then what happens is Haniyah is executed. Ismail Haniyah. Then you have the highest ranking guy in Hamas or in Hezbollah.
Sukir.
Next to, by the way, Nasrallah, who's on TV crying for that man and who's scared to death to die himself. You have some very active and significant action being taken. Whether or not Iran wants to admit that Israel was behind that helicopter crash, they know what's going on. They're watching leaders. Israel is taking a very smart avenue in destroying the leaders, cutting off the head of the snake. Okay? So Iran is now faced with a problem. Haniyeh was killed in the most secure facility that they have. Even they're in the mountain nuclear facilities were not as secure as this area that they had secured. And Haniyeh was killed like that, like a fly. Okay? And his bodyguard. So now you have the president of Iran who's wanting to take a more moderate role because he's seeking to change the face of Iran for a short amount of time. I still maintain the fact, by the way, that he's more of a radical than Raisi. He's just not showing his face.
No, this is a chess.
He's more of a radical than Raisi. But Iran is now faced with two decisions. The first decision is the one that I just explained, and that is we're running out of time. We got to get violent. We got to take advantage of it. We've got to, put our show the world where we're at and move forward. The second option is this. The second option is we're running out of time, and we are convinced, especially after what happened in Lebanon with Israel, with their preemptive attack, we are convinced that Israel is going to attack us. Now, the thing that they're convinced of, and I really believe this, because if you listen to media speaking right now, especially the type of talks that are happening with Al Jazeera and Iran and what's going on, they are convinced that they are days, if not months away from Israel going on a massive bombing campaign and destroying every nuclear facility that they have. Using their bunker busters, doing whatever it takes. They are convinced that Israel is about to destroy their nuclear facility. Now, if I am the supreme leader of Iran, and I am working with what appears to be to the rest of the world, a moderate president, the most immediate thing I'm going to do, especially understanding the international community's view on Israel, is I'm going to the European Union. I'm not going to the EU, to the UN. I'm going to the European Union because the European Union has the most direct influence on the United States of America, and I'm going to ask for a negotiation that centers around our nuclear facilities. The very moment I get an agreement from the international community to negotiate on a nuclear facility, Israel can no longer bomb us because we're in the midst of a very, very, very important diplomatic option. Every country, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book. I'm going to enter into a diplomatic communication with you as in to protect an asset that I believe you're about to destroy. Because now it becomes a violation of international law, potentially. I don't think it would be in the case of Israel. But it becomes a violation of international law if you bomb a facility that is in the discussion or the function of a negotiation.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
That's what I think is happening.
They're putting this administration and they're putting the European Union in a bind. They're saying, wait a minute, you can't not negotiate. I mean, here we are. We're talking about negotiation. We're talking about behaving. We're talking about being nice. And you're not going to talk to us about it?
Why do you think Gans and Gavir just did something over the last few weeks to completely subvert Bibi Netanyahu, and our State Department, Blinken himself, stepped up and said, you guys better knock it off. We're supporting Bibi. Why in the world do you think that's the case? Because the United States is hoping that Israel will take preemptive action before they enter into a negotiation that's going to drain them of all kinds of resources for the next several years.
Now, that you're going to have to put on the table here and say, why do you think the United States is hoping that Israel is going to take up preemptive action?
One reason and one reason only: elections. Only reason.
What does
it's a temporary desire.
What does Harris Biden get from a American-made Israeli jets flying over to Tehran and blowing up facilities in Tehran?
Very simple. Very simple. I'm going to be given an opportunity as Kamala Harris to go in and to negotiate a solution to the mess that Israel has created. There's no other reason other than that. She's already started down the path of rebuking Bibi. She didn't show up to his speech. She waits to make Bibi come and have a conversation with her. After the conversation, she publicly berates him.
The Democrats have decided that Israel is a liability and not an asset.
So it behooves the Democrats to be the people that are going to put a stop to a serious war action when they've already won the hearts and minds over for people that are sympathizers with Gaza. They want to be able to make the excuse that Israel is warmongering and seeking to create a regional war by destroying Iran's nuclear assets. It's an election thing. I'm going to tell you this right now, David. If there was no election going on right now, we were just in the midst of just a regular whatever, then I would laugh at myself and say that's a crazy cockamamie idea. But already you have the Secretary of State basically saying, we are supporting Netanyahu's stand on the Philadelphia corridor right now. Why in the world is that going to happen? Why in God's green earth would they do that? We already know. Already know.
I think Blinken is trying to get to an agreement. I think more than anything, everything that I've heard from the Americans is they're trying to push Bibi into making more concessions and agreeing to things that he hasn't agreed to yet.
I agree, but the problem is we all understand how this works. The United States of America understands this better than anybody. There's already a very distinct separation that's being created between Sunni countries and the United States of America because Sunni countries recognize their only ticket to being a part of a bigger financial community. Like, for example, Saudi Arabia's desire to be a member of the G7. Their only ticket to do that is through Israel. If they can't normalize with Israel, there's no way in the world they can be able to produce the safe type of trade that they need to in order to bring into fruition all the things that they need to. And that includes oil, by the way. You can't even get oil across the pipe to Europe if you don't facilitate what Israel will, in essence, create through the use of that functional land bridge. There's no way.
So here's the thing, okay? If the United States of America loses its appeal to the Sunni world, meaning the Arab Sunni world, that is Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Gulf states, if the United States of America loses its appeal to the Sunni world, you know where the Sunni world is going to turn to.
Oh, they're going to, well, besides Russia, I mean, let's...
They've already turned to Russia.
Yeah. But you have to keep this in mind, too. They have already given up on the United States of America. The only way that they're going to change their attitude with respect to their dependency upon the United States of America to stand with them in their battle against Iran is if somebody like Trump gets elected. If he gets elected, this becomes a non-conversation. But you also have to keep in mind, too, they are wanting to, for whatever reason, create closer relationships through China or with China, which is probably not even going to be established because of the fundamental disagreements that Saudi Arabia has with them, right? But watch Iraq. Keep an eye on Iraq because Iraq is becoming more and more of a bigger player. Oh, and this is becoming a, I'm telling you, bro, like this is, and then by the way, even when let's just say you stop analyzing the geopolitics of the region in the current moment, and you look at it from a biblical perspective, even Iraq makes sense because of the rise of Babylon that we read about in the Old Testament.
I want to add on one more ticking clock that a lot of people don't think about. Okay, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is 85 years old.
Oh yeah. And that's a big deal. And it's one that we haven't talked about a lot. And I'm glad you bring that up. He's running out of time. Matter of fact, I think that's what his hopes were. His hopes, Khamenei, his hopes were very much so for Raisi to potentially be that next supreme leader. And he would have been the perfect one. Why do you think Helocopter had a visit with Raisi? I mean, come on, bro.
You really think
we all see that?
Do you really think it was us?
Probably.
I mean,
And I think it may have been one of the best moves Israel made. And I'll tell you why. Because if they did make that move, then they know what we already understand, and that is Iran would never admit it. Iran, even if they knew it, even if they had videos of Mossad agents disabling the helicopter, they would never release that information, because that would be them telling the whole world they cannot protect their most valuable assets from Israel.
So
they will never do that.
How did they make the assassination of Hania public? Because if they could have, they would have said he fell out of his bed at night and broke his head.
The reason why they did that, the reason why they made the assassination of Hania public, is because it serves as a much greater inflammatory tool. First of all, it's not a direct Iranian leader, number one. And number two, and perhaps more significantly and more importantly, it involves the greatest piece of leverage that Iran has right now, which is Gaza. That's why.
Do we have time for another event or another subject before we kind of?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's tackle it, because these are all very important.
Okay. One of the things I want to tackle is what's going on inside the Palestinian world. And
we want to talk about these aircraft carriers too. Could we talk about that as well for a second?
Okay, let's hit aircraft carriers. By the way, does everybody understand that when we say aircraft carrier, we're not talking about one?
Yeah, we're talking about the group, right?
We're talking about what I think the United States calls a strike group or
carrier group. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Which includes destroyers, and it includes submarines, and includes, it is a massive projection of power into the Middle East. And here's the thing. The aircraft carrier groups, just a quick one. The two aircraft carriers that are now in the Middle East are the Abraham Lincoln and the Franklin Roosevelt.
It's so crazy.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. The Lincoln has been here for a while. Okay. The Roosevelt was in the Gulf of Oman trying to deal with with Iran / the Red Sea kind of dynamic, okay? And the United States brought in the Abraham Lincoln all the way from Guam as in just south of India. And what I'm trying to say is there's two American carrier groups in the Middle East, which is a huge amount. And then I think I just saw a little bit of information that the USS George Washington was called into San Diego for repairs, which means there's no carrier in the Pacific today.
And that's crazy. I mean, you just think about it. It's crazy. And you start looking at some of the titles that I'm looking at that relate to this. It's wild. Like it's funny that you mentioned in this. I mean, it's actually worthwhile having a discussion regarding. But it's really funny that you mentioned the USS Abraham Lincoln arriving in Central Command. Like, I don't think people understand the significance of these types of moves taking place. And I guess the question that I have, because I'm not so sure I have an answer, the question that I have is why all of these tactical deployments into the Middle East? Why are we pulling our assets out of the Pacific near Japan? Why are we even pulling out our assets that are in the Pacific off the coast of the United States of America? What are we seeing that's so desperate right now that we see the need to make these types of maneuvers, especially leaving our western end completely vulnerable?
Okay, I can't help it. I mean, somebody just hit me in the face with this, okay? What we're seeing, and I could talk geopolitics with you, but here's the thing. What would happen in the world if Israel did get smacked? I mean, major. What would happen in the world if a mushroom cloud goes up over Tel Aviv? Or what would happen in the world if the Iranians do manage to pull together a ring of fire the way they're talking about it? Or what would happen in the world if they do manage to pull together some kind of joint maneuver with the Turks and the Russians? What would happen in the world if this becomes an Ezekiel 38 event?
Well, the good news is, and I want to say this before I even answer that question. The good news is Ezekiel 38 can't even begin to happen. Like, we're not even close to Ezekiel 38, in the sense that in order for Ezekiel 38 to happen, you have to have peace in Israel. And it has to be so much peace that Israel doesn't see a need to have fenced cities. Okay, good luck that happening right now. It's not happening right now. However, let me just say this. If that does happen, and we find ourselves in an Ezekiel 38 scenario, Israel will be cooked. There's nothing Israel can do about it until God steps in, and God will step in. And that's when we'll actually see God judging a portion of the world. And I think that there's no other way of putting it. I believe that is when the world will witness divine intervention.
But I again, to answer your question from a geopolitical, I'm looking at a map of the world and I'm saying, wait a minute, what I'm seeing is the United States of America with all its military assets maneuvering to make sure that an Ezekiel 38 event will not happen. And yeah. I find that it's just amazing.
But this is my question, David.
James, it's amazing for me to be able to say a sentence like that the geopolitical maneuvering of military assets by the biggest marine of power in the world is maneuvering to make sure that biblical prophecy is not fulfilled.
I think you're onto something big there. The question that I would ask is this: is that the only reason why they're in the Middle East right now? Or is there any other thoughts that you're having?
No, there's a lot of thoughts, but what I can't help is, like other things in my life and world history, all of a sudden you see these mechanisms and movements, and this gear is turning this way and that lever is going that way. And then all of a sudden something happens where you say, wait a minute, this is all biblical.
Yep.
And what we're seeing, and I know it's weird to say this about aircraft carriers, but I am seeing a mechanism that is actually lining up. And I don't know if this is the time. I don't know if this is Ezekiel 38. But again, what would bring the kind of peace that Ezekiel 38 needs into the Middle East is a massive American military power, because Israel can't do it on its own. Okay. Yeah. Spreading an umbrella over Israel, saying to Israel's enemies, you have no choice, get out of this. A change in American mentality that says their job is to, push back against the enemies of Israel, because the enemies of Israel are the enemies of the United States, what we're not seeing right now. And that would be the precursor of any kind of Ezekiel 38 event.
I would agree with that. That is solid analysis. I would totally agree with that. And I agree with that based on what the Bible says. I agree with that is solid biblical geopolitical analysis. I would agree. And there's a lot of questions about that. Like, how does that get fulfilled, right? Like, how does that happen?
I get you.
And that's the struggle.
Here's the thing. I'm feeling sometimes, and all our friends, including my wife, I don't know if she's listening to me, would very, very much enjoy me being on this side of the debate, is sometimes when you see the snow on the TV screen, all of a sudden creates a figure that all of a sudden you recognize. And I think that is basically what the Bible is supposed to do. Is supposed to be that figure that you're looking for in all the chaos in this world that we're seeing all over the place.
Okay. More evidence of the fact that we are getting near the end and God knows what he's doing. Let me run this next question by. This is important because we talked about this before we chose to broadcast, and I think it's one we promised everybody we talk about. Let's go over these numbers that we just found out, these poll numbers in Gaza. I think that's where you were going to go before I brought up the aircraft carrier. Let's talk about that for just a second, because this is another interesting one. By the way, can I just tell you this? Initially, I think our audience that watched us start broadcasting together used to not be all that comfortable with us getting in broad disagreements. But I think that they really like us doing that because it brings a lot better data to the table. We come up with really good ideas doing what we're doing, and I appreciate it because I say that because you kind of lit a fire under me that deals with this thing that we're talking about related to the carrier groups, at least the geopolitical side of this, that I'm going to go home and run with. I got to think about it, and I'll talk. I have an idea for you on this. But anyway, okay, let's talk about this poll.
Okay,
and why this is significant. I know this was the one you wanted to bring up, right? That's what you were talking about?
I'm trying to get back to this. Give me a minute to find the Jerusalem poll.
Okay, so this goes back to the picture of things are not what you think, and this speaks volumes of many of the things that we're actually seeing right now. And it helps to make better sense of what's taking place, especially when we start talking about this picture of lying and all the lying that's going on and some of the things that are happening. You have that in front of you?
I'm getting it. Okay, here we go. Okay, here's the thing. The backup for this is this. Everybody keeps on saying that the Palestinians as a people are supporting what Hamas is doing, that the Arab world is standing behind the Hamas. And we're hearing more and more, we heard more and more evidence from polls that were actually taken by all kinds of different organizations about the support that the Palestinians are giving the Hamas, specifically Yahya Sinwar, and how much they're actually behind them. And we're hearing things like 62%, 70% of the Palestinians are supporting Hamas, and and so forth and so on. The United States, the Israeli military intelligence has uncovered a couple of very specific documents, and you can go in and actually see the documents that actually are showing that the polling that the Hamas and the Arabs have been doing inside the Gaza Strip has showed completely different results from the results that they are publishing in the world press. Meaning, when you ask a Gazan, do you support what Hamas is doing? According to Hamas, 70% say yes.
73% was the last number that I heard.
73% said yes. The actual result, according to what we have found actually in documents that were actually uncovered in Gaza, is less than 30.
Now, okay, can I ask you a question? Is that a poll from people that are in Gaza, or are we talking about people that are in Judea, Samaria?
That's a poll from people in Gaza.
Gaza, okay. That's a surprise.
And here's another one. This is one that really blew me away, okay? When the people in Gaza were polled, who do you think will win this war? What the Hamas published is 56% of the Gazans said Hamas would win this war.
Even though they don't want them to.
Yeah. Okay, here's the actual result. 30%, meaning even the people in Gaza don't believe that Hamas is going to win this war. And here's the thing. 51% of the people in Gaza believe Israel is going to win this war.
Wow.
That's opposed to what the Hamas has been publishing.
Now, okay. How do you deal with the people that will come back and go, well, that's IDF information. That's Israeli propaganda.
No, we got documents. Check it out. Go onto the IDF website. But what I'm trying to say is this, and again, it goes back to what we started this whole discussion with, is what do you call it? The how do you say, the portraying of a lie is acceptable practice.
Yeah.
How do you rate the satisfaction with the performance of the Palestinian authorities and leaders? Are you satisfied or not? They asked about the Hamas. Are you satisfied? According to Hamas, 62% said they're satisfied. The real result was 30% were satisfied. Are you satisfied with Yahya Sinwar? 52% said that they were satisfied. Only 22% actually are.
Wow. So now, so that's 52 and 22. So that means we're dealing with 74% accounted for. What happens to the other 26%? Do we know where that data comes?
Are you? No, this is about. Okay, the question was, how do you rate your satisfaction with the performance of Hamas? 62% said positive. but only 31 were positive. For instance, Mahmoud Abbas, by the way, 22%, less than 22% on both sides.
No, explain that to me.
They didn't.
So 22.
You come to
20
Palestinians and you say, okay, are you satisfied with
Mahmoud
the
Abbas.
performance of Mahmoud Abbas?
Now, this is in Judea, Samaria. They're being asked this question.
No, this is in Gaza.
In Gaza,
All of this is
okay.
in Gaza. 22% said yes. And here's the thing. Here's what the polls said, okay, what the Gazan Authority, what Hamas actually published was 21%. Meaning they didn't lie about Mahmoud Abbas. Only 20%.
Because they hate him. Yeah.
Yeah, and the people hate him. Where did they lie? Okay, about Yahya Sinwar. Okay, Yahya Sinwar got the same amount of support as Mahmoud Abbas, but they lied and gave him much, much more.
That's interesting.
Which is why the people in Gaza are not totally behind this war as much as everybody is thinking.
Even with the loss of civilian lives.
Yeah.
Probably especially because of the loss of civilian lives. Because those that are in Gaza that understand what's really going on are going to be upset with Hamas because these lives are being lost at the hands of Hamas.
So here's one of the narratives I've kept on hearing from the left. You're just creating more enemies. By bombing this, you're just creating more enemies. And you are going to be blamed for all of the death and all of what's happened in Gaza, and generation of generation is going to blame you. Now, again, what I always found interesting is if that's the situation, what happened in Nazi Germany? What happened in Imperial Japan?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. They were bombed out of Timbuktu to Kingdom Come. Why didn't that translate into generations of Germans hating Americans?
That is a very profound question. Yeah.
And
I think the world recognized the inherent danger that was in front of them without the propaganda.
I'm looking at what happens to the Germans. What happens to a German adult sitting in Dresden or in Berlin, okay, watching what's going to happen. According to the leftist mindset, a German 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old sitting in Dresden in 1944, 1943, before the end of the war, is going to hate Americans so much that his children are going to hate and his children's children are going to hate. And here's the thing. After Germany surrendered, we don't have generational hatred. Now, everybody is saying, wait a minute, but the Hamas, okay, is being stood up, is being raised up because they're standing up to Israel, and nobody is actually blaming Hamas for the terrible, terrible destruction of Gaza. And here's the thing, it turns out that yes, they are. And the only way that Israel can win this war is not only by defeating Hamas militarily, but is by delegitimizing Hamas as a leader of the Muslim world.
Okay. Yeah.
And here, just to end this in one last thing, you know, and I know by living in the Muslim Middle East, that by defeating the Hamas and humiliating them physically, militarily, you're pulling the rug out of any kind of authority they have, because in the Middle East, okay, the only authority you get is by power.
Yeah. I mean, it's our culture. I mean, you know, we talk about this, David. I mean, the last time that may have been the very, very first time that I was in Israel with you, and you were our tour guide. You I don't know if you remember this, but you may have noticed people in our group, a few people in our group were accusing me of behaving irrationally or somewhat ungodly, because when we were just outside the, I believe we were in the Jewish quarter, we came across a Arab. I think he was Egypt. He may have been Egyptian. I don't remember, but he had a really nice little shop there, and I started engaging with him, and we were getting loud and we were getting aggressive, and I was darn near yelling, and we were going back and forth, and we're speaking in Arabic, and there were people that I could hear from the corner of my ears telling my wife, I never saw this side of your husband. He's so this, he's so that, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of back and forth. And you were pretty quick to correct everybody. And you said, look, let me explain something to you. You don't understand our culture and our background. And you need to know that if James didn't do this, speaking the language that he speaks, he would not be respected.
Yeah.
You know, and Pastor Jeff wasn't just in the back, just laughing, he was like literally trying to light a fire. He was he was actually instigating. He was trying to make things worse, that's what he used to do. He did that all the time. Pastor Jeff, bro, this was even before your time. We would go into some of these stores, and actually we would do this in the Arab quarter. Like we would do this in the old city in the Arab quarter when you could actually get away with doing it. Now you can't do it so much so. And he would start an argument. And he would say some of the craziest, most insulting nonsense out there. And then he would call me over and say, talk to them. And I'd be like, dude, are you kidding me? You just threw me in a mess. And then we would always end the conversation by having a cup of tea together, you know, them being mad that, you know, they got the bad end of the deal, but they respected us. Because that's the way it works. When they see weakness in you, they don't respect you. That's why I think it's hilarious when you see these people walking around, queers for Palestine. It's like, they don't respect that nonsense. Like you just don't get it. You don't understand our culture.
They make it very clear. Can I give you one more piece of information?
Yeah.
This Jerusalem Post. Listen to this. The question that was asked inside Gaza, okay? And again, these are actually documents that the Israeli army uncovered in Gaza, okay? And we have the polls and what was published, and we have what they actually found out. And there was a question that was asked of the Palestinian public by the Hamas, by the way. If the new presidential elections are held in the Palestinian Authority, and who would you want as president of the new Palestinian Authority? Meaning if there are elections, okay? And what the Gazans said, what they said is that the fake result that Hamas published is that Ismail Haniyeh, the guy that will
they want him.
Only will be elected to the Council of 72 Virgins, okay? Ismail Haniyeh was supposed to win 48% of the election polls, meaning 48% of the Gazans would have supported Ismail Haniyeh, but the actual result was 20%.
Wow.
And here's the thing. You know what the highest result was? Because they put Mahmoud Abbas, he got 22%. They put Ismail Haniyeh, he got 48%, according to their results, okay? They put the rest. Here's the real results, okay? Mahmoud Abbas, 25%. Ismail Haniyeh, 21%. I will not participate in the elections, 52%.
No way.
That is the real result.
Wow.
Meaning 52% of the people in Gaza would not participate in an election that Mahmoud Abbas and Ismail Haniyeh were actually the representatives. Which means, and again, I don't know how to say, this gives me more hope that we can finish this at some way. And again, you want to go into the prophecy, we can move into a peaceful situation in the Gaza, with the Gaza Strip. This gives me more hope than a lot of things that I've seen for a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. That is a striking development. And I think that it's one that's worthwhile. Wow. That takes a little bit of time to process.
50% would not even take.
That's the number that shocks me more than any of the other numbers.
Yeah.
Like you give me the other numbers, I'm not really surprised, even with Mahmoud Abbas. But the number that surprises me is that one. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Maybe that's the way that they feel because they recognize their vote isn't going to matter. Well, because they're throwing people off of rooftops.
Yeah, but here's another thing. Since when what Arab Muslim nation has ever been run by a democratic vote?
Yeah, come on. Yeah, I mean, we all know the reality.
By the way, but I have a question. Malaysia, is it democratic? I don't
Man,
know.
I don't know. I don't know.
Malaysia
That's a
and
good
Indonesia,
question. I do not know.
because they're
Indonesia is a different ball of wax. Indonesia, I've got a lot of familiarity with where things work there, and it's a complicated egg to crack. There's a multi-layered onion peeling thing that goes on there, and all that to say, with Indonesia, it's complicated. I have the benefit of having friends that are Indonesian that understand it pretty well, that have allowed me to get in their heads and talk to them, because I've been particularly concerned about some of the geopolitics that surround that specific area, only because of the trade route issues that I've been really exploring.
well, you
That
want to
Saudi Arabia is very concerned with.
a very interesting piece of information about Indonesia is that Indonesia is a Muslim country, but has a very large Christian population.
That's right. Yeah.
And here's the thing, okay? Tourists now in Israel who come to Israel to view Israel or to tour Israel in this situation, okay? The percentage of Indonesian tourists is higher than any other nationality from
In Indonesia?
yeah, no. I'm talking about Indonesian Christian tourists in Israel.
Got you. Yeah,
There's-
that I believe. I believe that, because we used to see them all the time.
Yeah, but they're not as afraid as American Christians or European Christians or Russian Christians, by the way, to come to Israel. Very interesting.
Yeah, we have one of the sweetest Indonesian couples in our church that, man, do they love Jesus. And there's a lot that they get. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, they are fearless people. They do not care. It's all about what God wants. So it's a matter of fact, one of my worship leaders is one of those guys, an amazing guy. Him and his wife are just amazing people. So, okay, I'm going to give you the final thoughts because we're running out of time here. We're easily an hour and a half into this.
Iran is playing catch me if you can kind of a game like this. And I think Iran is freaked out about what's going to happen with the American elections, because they're freaked out. They realize that America will not come to a head-to-head confrontation with them unless they pull off all the Stokes. But they are worried that a Trump administration will start using soft power more than a Biden administration is, and they're really, really afraid of that. I think they've agreed that both sides are not going to get into a war with Iran for Israel unless Iran starts it. But they do realize that Iran will be on the receiving end of economic, financial, diplomatic pressure from the American administration if Trump is in power. What the Biden administration is not doing. I mean, think about this. I mean, you can say to Iran, you want to have a negotiation about the nuclear, quit attacking American soldiers in the Middle East. Yeah. Quit firing at American ships in the Gulf of, in the Red Sea. I mean, quit hitting, oil going through the Red Sea. I mean, you could start off with that, but America isn't doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we understand where that's all about. These are people that hate God, and the more you hate God, the more you'll hate his people. And that's just the way it is. I was yesterday, kind of a closing thought here. Yesterday I was at the park for a few minutes, and there was a man, he had a team of people with him. Clearly was a very large company that was testing a military drone at the park. They use the park to test some of this stuff sometimes. Cool. And I see him there, and I start engaging because I'm very fascinated with the technology side of things. And the guy who's doing the building for this other company starts to walk me through some of the technology that's being done. It's technology I've never seen before. I mean, it's pretty remarkable what's happening. It's like what they're doing is unbelievable. And the guy that's sitting in the corner, I could see it a mile away. He's Jewish, like he's the CEO of the other company, the bigger company, and you could tell he's Jewish. He looks at me. He sees the ribbon. He sees the dog tag that I'm wearing. And in the kindest, most broken up voice, he basically says, "Thank you for supporting me and my people." And I was able to sit down and have a conversation with him about the spiritual side of this and why it's so important for us to do this. And I think that it goes back to a picture that was drawn by my grandmother and my grandfather. I think it's a really good picture. Both my grandfathers were pastors in Egypt for their whole lives. One for 35 years, the other one for 65 years. The one who was a pastor in Egypt for 65 years, my dad's father, his wife, my grandmother, made a rule, you know this story, made a rule with all of his siblings and with my dad that they were not allowed to listen to the radio in 73 or in 67 that was Egyptian radio. They had to listen to Israeli radio because my grandma said that the Egyptians were lying. And the thing that my grandma knew, because she knew the Bible, is she knew that if she wanted her family to be blessed, that they needed to be taught to bless and love Israel.
Mm-hmm.
During one of the worst times of Egypt's national security at the hands of Israel, my grandma was teaching my uncles and aunts and my dad how to love Israel. And I can tell you, when I look at the Kaddis family, that we've been blessed with a remarkable heritage and an amazing history. And I think a lot of that is because of the biblical teaching that was handed down to us from generation to generation. And my statement to everybody watching us and listening to us is this: if you want to be blessed by God, bless his people. Please bless his people. It's really, really important. One of the ways you can do that, it's critical to me, is that you support David. Go to his Balagan Connection channel. That's a really important channel. We'll put the links, the moderators will put the links up to that. Also support Gihon Springs. If you open up the notes to this live show on Rumble or on YouTube, you'll see it. You can go and you can support it. And just know that God is working. There's some amazing stuff that he's doing.
God is working.
And we're in these last days, and we're watching Ezekiel 37 come to life. We're watching Amos 9 come to life. Unfortunately, we're watching Zechariah 12 come to life. We're watching Zechariah 14 come to life. We're watching Daniel 9 come to life. I could just go on and on and on and on and on and on about the Bible passages that we're watching right now. The Lord could come at any moment, folks. Let's wake up and recognize it for what it is. And let's take to heart these issues. They're important. You know, all the discussions we've been having in the politics and geographics and all that, they don't mean anything outside of the context of the fact that we have a true and living God who's doing a real work, and that we need to acknowledge it and worship him and live for him. So
here's my final thought for today, because I've been reading up about, Iran and aircraft carriers and China. I don't know if you remember from the old spy movies that a way to use code was to use a known book. And the code was a piece of paper that had holes cut out in them, okay, that you put on the right book, and you see corresponding letters according to the holes that are cut out on the book.
That's cool.
And that's how they would kind of figure out. That's how they would decipher the code. But here's the thing. We have a book. It's called the Bible. The world is an unclear set of holes in a page until you put it on the right book.
Yeah, that's amazing, bro. That's
and
such
then
great
you
insight.
see what the actual message actually is. And what I feel
insight.
that I saw it just now with all of these aircraft carriers and China and everything, you see, and all of a sudden you stop and you say, wait a minute, let's put all of this on that book, and all the holes that you have and all the gaps that you have, all of a sudden spell out a very clear message. God is in control.
It's amazing. And the funny thing is, God's told us. Like, he hasn't even made it mysterious. He's just like, I've revealed it to you. Matter of fact, that's a definition of mystery in the Bible. When the Bible uses the word mystery, it means to be revealed to us, It's amazing stuff. Well, let's do this. Let's close in prayer. Hope you guys have been blessed. This has been a great conversation. I love these conversations. I love them. They're really, really important. And again, I just want to thank you guys for your contributions with your super chats and super stickers. You are amazing people. We'll spend some time roasting y'all next week. Okay? So let's pray. Father in heaven, we just thank you for your goodness and your faithfulness, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for my dear brother, David, Lord. I thank you for the valuable treasure that he is to me and to all of us, Lord. I thank you for the knowledge that he brings to us, Lord. And I just pray that in the name of Jesus, you would cause us to be drawn closer to you through these engagements. and that we would walk with you, Lord, all the days of our lives. So, Lord, we love you. We pray that you would protect and bless your people, Lord. We pray that you would put your hand of protection upon Israel, and we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So, Lord, we love you and thank you. We look to you. We ask these things in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Bye, you guys. God bless you.
God bless. Lead out.
Shalom.
Lead out.